Win, 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 win. Fuck everything else. Win, 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 win. All right, listen, the karaoke is gonna need some work, but we're back at it. Weekly Go Getters Coaching Podcast. It's your boy, Dr. Andy Fata-Chan. Did the solo the other day. No crazy beginning, no beginning intro like that, but when Peter brings the energy, I gotta reflect back at him.
What up, guys? Super excited to be back on another episode. But yeah, man, let's get into it. I think this week we got something super tactical for you guys. We're gonna be talking all about all things weekly newsletters.
I used to hate newsletters, right? And I didn't think they were
Hundred
valuable
percent.
because I'm like, man, all these newsletters are like just bunching up in my inbox and they're super annoying, right? But I slowly realized I was like, all of the newsletters that I'm subscribed to are like retail stores and things like that, where it's like they're meant to sell, right? There's sometimes no real story behind a Banana Republic. Like Banana Republic's not going to give me a testimonial like this sweater changed my life. Maybe it does. Maybe it does. Certain fly sweaters out there, but Peter, like, what is like your 80/20 newsletters or writing in general?
Yeah, dude, I used to be in the same boat, man. I used to hate writing. Like we go to school for physical therapy, and for the most part, maybe like when we first get out, we start practicing. The majority of what we have to do from a writing standpoint is mostly documentation. And then all of a sudden, you get into entrepreneurship, and you're like, "Holy shit, I got to learn some copy, right? Like, how do I write in a way that attracts people to want to be able to open up, the things that I want to talk to them about?" And so for me, at the very beginning, I kind of went through a couple of different phases. I used to kind of just do kind of like a more like an informational type deal where I was just like, all right, all I'm going to do is just going to link them a thread to like one of our Instagram posts from this week, and then maybe I'll link like maybe a something that I was listening to. And so it was interesting because as we slowly started to track like the open rates, right, and maybe like who was clicking the buttons, it wasn't necessarily those posts that were as engaging. And so what I started to do was I started to look back on what were all the emails that I was opening. And then I realized that all the emails that I was opening were all conversational emails. And so it was kind of like a way that you could story tell a recent event or a conversation you had with somebody else. And then how do you tie that into whatever that call to action? And then from that format, it just becomes a lot more engaging. And so, same thing when we started doing that, we started to see, hey, the increase rates open up a little bit more. But yeah, what have you kind of done throughout the years for your weekly newsletters?
Yeah. All right. The weekly newsletter. So with our practice, Christy takes care of all of it. It's super funny because like we'll have patients that'll bring it up, and she's like, "Oh, your wife, that girl, man, she must have a degree in marketing." But I think Christy is a very good like to give people context and a background. Christy's fucking brilliant. She learns things extremely quick. She had a perfect GRE score. Like it's
Damn.
like intelligence and like absorbing information and stuff like that is very easy for her. So like her writing, sometimes I'm like, is that a grammatical error? I'm like, she's like, no, I just like she understands sentence structures and stuff like that way better than I do. So I think when she writes a story, I'm like, wow, it literally sounds like how Christy is talking. And I think she's always written like that. So I believe the same thing. It's always like in school we're taught like you have to use really long words, you have to use certain sentence structures, and like this isn't a complete sentence if you don't have like a noun, verb, whatever, right? But certain sentences can literally just be one word, and certain times when you speak to a friend or a homie, it's not complete sentences, it's not correct sentences, right? And like I think that's how you have to communicate through an email. I had Nabil Mehora. He started something called the copywriting course, and Christy and I took it together. Uh, and it's super funny because he breaks down all of what makes a really, really good copy. And I think one thing that he said that I thought was really, really good was like, Peter, if you were going to explain chronic back pain to a friend, right, instead of typing out a message to him, right, you should just explain it like to the camera as you would explain it to a friend, and then transcribe what you said to the camera onto actual text, and it'll be better copy than you trying to forcefully write something. Because that's all copy is, right? We're trying to transfer information from my brain to your brain and do it in a way that's like relatable to the other person. And the way that we're taught to write in school is not fucking relatable. We're fucking like Shakespearean like experience, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think I've been fortunate enough that, or like when I dove into I'm the type to like look at something and think, all right, this has got to get better. So I started immediately looking into the copywriting.
Yeah. One of the things that I realized is, and I used to do this as well too, is I used to write out a giant paragraph. So just like a massive blob of words on my emails. And then I would open up my own emails and I look at it, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, this is so long and convoluted. Like, I don't even feel like I'm interested in reading this. And so, from a tactic standpoint, I think if you guys are writing out conversational emails, instead of writing it as like a paragraph, do exactly what Andy just said, right? Like transcribe it so it's literally just like a one sentence word, or sorry, a one line sentence, and then from there, like put a space and then do another sentence, and then from there, it's just very easy for the eye to kind of like be attracted to, and it doesn't seem like, hey, it's super overwhelming.
Yeah. I I love there's a great course by this guy Sam Parr, and he's one of the co-hosts for My First Million, and he's got a thing called Copy That, and all it is he sends you an email. I believe it's for 10 days in a row, and in the email he talks about one fundamental principle of copywriting, and then you open up the article that he references, and he breaks down like why this is good copy, and he just says for 30 minutes you're going to rewrite the whole thing. And I think that is one way to start to get better at the skill of writing. And what you're going to find is like it's almost okay to have big paragraphs, but what do we learn in school, right? It's like big paragraph, right? The start of your essay, second paragraph, third paragraph, fourth paragraph. It's like big paragraph, one sentence, medium paragraph, one sentence. Like you almost want to have like this different kind of flow and frequency. I think of it like if you went to like an EDM concert and it was the same frequency the whole time, it would just be too much. But it's like, hey, let's have this chill thing where I'm telling you a lot of stuff, and then it dips a little bit, which is one sentence. Boom, we go back up to like a really explanation, exclamation thing. But there needs to be like texture to the fucking writing. So much writing is like fucking vanilla as fuck. Like you need to add texture to it.
Yeah, man, the way you're describing it makes it sound like almost like an art or a dance. And it's like, and so for you, I feel like one of the things you do a really, really great job at, and I don't even necessarily see it through your emails, but also just I see it through your like your day to day and how you write out your social media copy. And so for you, was this something that you ended up refining over the years and just got like multiple different reps in? And so because like for you, right, you're punching out like a post every single day. So you've kind of just like gotten really, really good at like writing things out. And so for people who are like looking to improve their copy, whether it's for a social media post, to be able to like engage with their audience a little bit better, to be able to connect with them a little more authentically, or from a longer form standpoint of an email, what's like a good tactic that you recommend they start with?
Man,
Or is it
it's
really just like, hey, you just got to get the damn reps in?
it's always got to get the damn reps in.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that you can immediately improve on is like understanding like how everything almost has a place, right? So like one of my favorite things when watching like stand-up comedy is like when a guy ties the joke in from the beginning, like to the end, and you're like, oh, that was juicy, like that was amazing. And I think that's like one thing that I always think about. It's like, how do I tie up this message together so that the parts are connected? And then the other thing I think about is like, what do I want this person to feel? Like, if I want this person to feel inspired, then I got to take them through a story where like, what's the problem? Where was I? What's the problem I encountered? What's the solution? And what was I able to accomplish afterwards? Like, boom, inspiration. If I'm just trying to be fucking vulnerable, right? I'm not going to end my email with like, oh, I conquered this fucking dragon. I'm ending the email with like, dude, I don't have it figured out, and that's it. Like I'm gonna figure it out right now, but at this very moment, like I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in the business. I don't know what's going on in my life. But I'm writing this to you because I think we all have a shared experience. And I think there's a lot of things in writing, like really, really good writing is just raw, authentic, and it's not filtered. Whereas like everything that we're taught in writing has a filter to it. So I think the first thing I would think about is like, how does everything fit together? You know, what do you want this person to feel? And make that shit raw and authentic because that's the stuff that's gonna hit somebody.
Yeah, I love that. Take them through like a roller coaster of emotions, right? Yeah, one of the things that we do a lot of is try and talk about like almost like a testimonial, but almost or even like an inspirational story of like a recent client that we saw. And we'll basically just write it at the very beginning of like, hey, this is where they started, and it's like a very deep, dark, place in their time. Like, hey, when when Peter first came to me, he'd been dealing with chronic back pain for the last 10 years. He'd been through boom, boom, boom. Like he'd been through like a chiropractor. He'd gone through surgeries, and he was, so stiff, and you're just tired of living in pain. And then you talk about all these different emotions that this lead feels, and hopefully with the hope that, hey, whoever's reading this on the other side, like, oh wow, like this person sounds exactly just like me. And then you walk them through, okay, well, what do they do, right? What was the sole start of the climax, right? Like, hey, maybe they came in and within the first evaluation they were able to experience, like, I don't know, like a 2 to 3 level degree of improvement through the pain levels. Then you take them through another set of the story. It's like, oh, all of a sudden they had a flare up, right? And then what happens? And then you take them through all the way till they become, the hero of their journey, right? It's like all of a sudden, boom, like, like 3 or 12 weeks later, you know, Peter's able to get back to deadlifting again. He hadn't been able to do this for the last, 3 years, and it was incredible. And then will maybe like leave them with like a testimonial of like of the client that we saw at the very bottom. We leave it with a call to actions like, hey, if you've been dealing with back pain and you feel like Peter and you feel like there's no hope, right, and you want to be able to achieve something similar like this, like just like reply back to this email. And so you can, yeah, take them through like a story of these undulating ups and downs, and then leave them with a call to action at the end, and kind of see what happens.
I Dude, that is like that's actually I gotta steal that from you, right? Where it's like, oh wow, we're finally making it through. Psych motherfucker,
This
we're
is-
back in the
yeah.
fucking basement and we got another problem we have to slay. One thing to add on that, right? It's like if you want someone to continue to write the email or read the email, this is kind of like how you kind of can tie things together. Like let's say Peter is someone that's been through, 10 plus years of pain, right? In the beginning of the email, it's like my client Peter's like a shaggy dog. People are like, what the hell is this guy even saying, right? It's like, my client Peter's a shaggy dog. This is what he's been going through. But that's exactly what makes him a shaggy dog. He just keeps showing up, right? Like, that shaggy dog looks like it's been kicked to the curb, but it keeps showing up. It keeps showing up. And eventually you bring it in and eventually it gets where it wants to be. Are you a shaggy dog? Do you want to get taken care of? Book a call, like it's like one of those like, let's tie everything back together. But I love it's almost like, oh wow, they're solving the problem. Boom, we're not solving the problem. We got another thing we got to address. With writing, where did you find inspiration? Like, how did you know, like, oh man, I can't, do this technical style of writing?
Yeah, a lot of it, like I was mentioning before, is really just people that I would subscribe to. A lot of these entrepreneurs that I end up subscribing to on their emails. Again, I'll subscribe to so many people, and then there'll be people that will just like blast me with a ton of shit, with a ton of just like information. I'm like, okay, I don't think I like this. Unsubscribe. And then so I slowly start to curate a collection of like, okay, hey, this is the style of content that gets me to open up these emails. And some of it is kind of these like clickbaity titles, right? Like we kind of mentioned before. Hey, like, are you a shaggy dog? And then I'll open it. But you got to follow up the clickbait title with something, that's something that's valuable. Right? And I think it's email is the art of email is almost similar to social media. People are there to be either educated or to be entertained or to feel and connect in some type of way. And so I think the way we can hit on that is really through some sort of like storytelling, whether it's through a past client, a personal experience, Or a lot of times too, if we have some sort of major sporting event or like the presidency or the election, right? How can we tie that into our message of what we're trying to provide with them, which is ultimately like physical therapy?
That you know, in 2025, like one of my goals is to do like a sprint triathlon, and the other one is to do stand up comedy.
Yeah.
Have like one set. It's gonna be fucking horrendous, but I think attempting to do stand up comedy will make me a better communicator. And I was reading a stand up book, like trying to get ideas of like it's essentially a book about how to write jokes, and one of them is exactly what you said. When the easiest thing to make a joke about is like current events, like what's happening now, right? So it's like to give an example right now, it's like TikTok just shut down, right? And then it came back immediately. So your email can literally be like, "Hey, Motion RX is closing down." Just kidding, it's back up, just like TikTok. And then, like you break down, it's like, what happens when you're looking for like these quick changes, right? It's just like these ebbs and flows. It's like that never works, right? Most of these things don't last forever, and blah, 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 you can create a story from that. But I think that current events thing is super. Like you have the Super Bowl, you have March Madness, like you know, there's so many ways that like you can structure an email to reflect like what's going on at this very moment.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll just tie in my own like personal training. I remember it was like a year or two ago. I was training for like a 5K to break 20 minutes, and it basically took me an entire year to go sub 20 for a 5K. And I just ended up when I finally ended up hitting a sub 25K, I basically put it in an email, and I was like, "Hey guys, like this is everything that I've done to be able to increase my time by like 30 seconds. I trained for an entire year to improve my time by 30 seconds, you know? And I just kind of talk about, hey, like, I've gone through a lot of these like, ups and downs of, trying to go through a 5K and I missed it by like 5 seconds. And then I had to go back to the drawing board and refigure out what my training is like. And I think like the call to action or the how I tied it all ultimately at the end was like, hey, if the larger your goal, right, the more consistent that you'll need to be, and you have to kind of like manage that expectation a little bit. But most importantly, the goal is to never give up. And so I think I tied it together with like, hey, like and so if you've been dealing with back pain and you tried multiple different things, right? It's like you tried resting, you tried stretches, you tried other physical therapists, right? It doesn't mean like, hey, you just give up. You just have to come back to the drawing board and come up with the right solution so that you can get back to doing X, Y, Z.
And I think a lot of like when people feel like, oh man, I don't know what to create, I don't know what to do, that documented the journey aspect is super, super helpful. And I think what most people don't realize is like you're a small business. Lean into that, right? Like when you go in the information side of things, you're almost trying to be someone that you actually aren't. Like you're better
Yeah.
off just being like, yo, just figured this out for the first time. That's kind of funny, right? Like we didn't have a way to collect payments. Anyways, I'm going to give you behind the scenes of what it's like to grow a small business. I'm going to be teaching you about movement. I'm going to be teaching you about pain. And I'm like, yeah, that's exciting to me, right? It's like I get to live vicariously through you. I get to see how things evolve over time, and people love to hear an underdog story. So like when you're thinking about like, oh, why does anyone care if I share my personal struggles? On the other side of the screen is another human. And if you read enough books, you start to realize that every single human has the same exact struggles. Every single human is afraid to make that entrepreneurial jump. So when you talk about your journey, it almost gives them like their heart starts racing and like certain circuits in her brain start firing. It's like, oh, that's exactly what I want to do, right? But I'm not brave enough to do it. But look at this guy. That's so amazing. I want to support him. And like those things happen all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like email is also an opportunity for you to showcase your personality. Like I say yo all the time in my emails out to her, and it's just part of who I am. That's kind of what makes our like emails at Motion RX unique. It's like Peter's gonna you can tell hey he's like not super serious, and he's providing value, but in a very like casual way. And again, like you guys don't have to do that. That's just like my personality and what comes across as natural to me. But you don't have to pretend to be something that you're not. And I think that's one of the struggles that a lot of people have at the beginning. And I know this because it's the same thing I struggle with. I almost felt like, hey, I need to have come across as this very like professional kind of demeanor when I'm writing this email, like, hey, just health information only. But then the more like laid back I, became, I feel like a lot more people became, more relatable towards that type of content.
100%. And for people that are like, I struggle with like always having a call to action within like an email. You always kind of come back to this number. It's 80-20, right? 80% of your writing, 80% of your content should just be delivering value. And then 20% of it should be the call to action. With that said, I think there's certain things when it comes to the call to action that people really need to be mindful of, right? Like when you ask someone to do things, you have to be like insanely specific. This past weekend, we were ramping up our Google ad spend. I went through every single button on our website, and I had like some long call to actions, like, "Are you sick and tired of feeling pain? Want and you want click here to work with your performance-based physical therapist." Another one would say something else, and it's like, "Now I've switched all of the buttons to schedule your first session with our team or schedule your first session." Right? It's like people just want the easiest like understanding of like what to do next. So it's like, click this button, schedule a call, get on a phone call with XYZ, and we'll see if we can help you out. Like, just, you almost have to lay things out for people. But if you like almost change your CTA like every single week, it gets very confusing. Or like if your CTA is like very different, like, want to work with a performance physical therapist, click this button. Want to schedule your first evaluation, click this button. It's just like, you should probably keep something consistent for a period of time and then change it, because that's also going to give you some feedback, right? Like, wow, we did really well in January and February. What is the trend there? Oh, we had this in a call to action, right? So like you start to get more and more data.
Yeah, with your weekly, because we've actually kind of like experimented with both. Hey, as the call to action, hey, just reply back to this email like a one word, like such as like, hey, I'm ready, or something like that, and one of our team members will reach out to you. So we've experimented with that, and then we've also experimented with like, hey, click this button here to book a call with our team to set up your first visit. And I think there's like pros and cons to both. And here's what I mean. When people say, when you have the call to action as, hey, just reply back to this email, that's the only action that they need to take. And you can go back and track it immediately and reach out to them. Whereas if you say, hey, click this button, they have to go to another website or your landing page, and then from there they may need to resubmit their information, like their name and then their phone number. Um, so it's basically an additional step. Now, the con, though, of maybe somebody who is about to reply back to your email manually is that you don't know who actually is about to reply back. There's nothing that you can do to track that. Now, the cool side with email is that you can track to see who clicks the buttons. Right. So it's like, if I can track and see, hey, who clicked on this button in my email? And so maybe they click the button, but they don't actually fill out their information. So, hey, they're like almost there. So for me, that's like a sign, okay, hey, I should probably like have our front desk reach out to this person who clicked the button, but never actually submitted anything. So I don't know. I think there's, pros and cons to both. But yeah, what are you guys doing right now with your email newsletter, whether it's for like Moment physical therapy or for the education side of things?
Yeah, for the Moment physical therapy side of things, we just click the like, hey, if you're interested, you can book a call here. So we always use the button. I like the button. I feel like I've always tried like DM us this, and it doesn't work
Hmm.
quite as much in regards to like setting up like a plan of care or like setting up a sales call. I think the DM thing works really, really well to like improve engagement, where it's like, hey, if you want this like free, blah, 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 DM us this. Like, we get a ton of the DMs through that. With Moment Education, most of my weekly newsletters have no call to action. I'm just straight up like giving some value, giving updates, breaking stuff down. Um, I treat the Moment Education newsletter like a personal update about my life, what I'm learning and focusing on, and like random cool things that I find on the internet, right? Like, it's completely irrelevant sometimes. Like, I was telling you about the fake reviews thing, the fake
Yeah.
spot. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, this is a dope plugin that I found on Chrome. I think you guys would love it, right? So it's like if you follow Moment Education, you're gonna get a lot of clinical stuff. You get some, business entrepreneurial behind the scenes stuff, and then just like random shit that I was, oh wow, I stumbled upon this like really cool poem, like here's this poem. There's not too many call to actions because we don't have anything that's like super evergreen. Like if we ever do create an evergreen product, it's always at the bottom, right? It's like when we have our courses launch, I'm always putting it at the bottom, like, hey, if you're interested in attending one of our courses, click here. I don't do a lot of like the reply. I'll hit the reply sometimes, like when I think it's a good conversational email.
Mm,
It's like, oh, this is like my goal for this year, right? Or this is my word for 2025. What's your word? Hit reply with an email. I just want to know what you're thinking about. Um, but there are certain like things I think from an EMR perspective that can make it so casual. So like one thing we did was we started affiliate marketing for Moment Education. Say, hey, if you know anyone that's like super interested in Moment Education, and they sign up, all you have to do is let us know when they've signed up, what their name is, and then we'll give you $200. And we're not going to do any links because links are, I think when you start to push a link, it feels like, you know, it feels too salesy and it feels too pushy. I want this to happen naturally. Recommend us to a friend if you think we're good and you love what we did, and then we'll give you $200. And oh, by the way, when you recommend it to your friend, this is how I want you to write the email: referral for Moment Education. Tell me what your friend's name is, and then just write a little bit. Give me a paragraph like what's been going on. Like I love to hear from you. Would love to know like how life has been. We had a couple of people hit us with like a nice paragraph, like just like I was like blown away. I'm like, oh wow, like that's really cool. So it's like if you're writing a newsletter, always remember that you're not writing it to 2,000 people. You're writing it to one person on the other side.
yeah, I love that, man. Let's talk a little bit about like open rates. I think this is like a good thing to kind of understand because I know at the very beginning I was like, man, I'm putting so much time into like security this email. Like, why isn't my open rate like 90%? Like, so I think that's actually something really good to kind of like manage and set expectations. But I know for across the board, I think just like email industry as a whole, I think if your open rate is above like 15%, that's considered like stellar. Right. I know for us at Motion RX, I think our open rate at the very beginning when our email list was probably around, I think like 2,000 people, it was close to like 50, 60% open rate. And then I think like as you grow and add to that list, the number will go down a little bit. Right now we sit around like 30, 35% consistently open rate. I think we have our email list is around like 9,000. But for you guys, like what are you guys kind of seeing so that people kind of know what to expect?
Yeah, and it's the same thing, right? Naturally, like if your email list is your patients, then it's going to be very, very high. Our open rate sits about like 50%. Ever since I've started doing more and more lead magnets with Moment
Hmm.
Education, it's my open rate for Moment Education used to be 80 something percent,
Love
and it's
that.
dropped down to like 60%. And certain emails will do a lot better. Like if I have an email that's like super simple, like when I listened to the Jesse Itzer podcast, I was like, hey guys,
Mhm.
stop what you're doing, listen to this podcast. Email was super simple. This podcast would completely change your 2025. Done. I was like, like I don't have a lot of emails where like stop exactly what you're doing, list like do this now. When I have those kind of emails, it's like open rate is insane, right? But when it's like my casual weekly emails, then it's pretty chill. We're at like the 60 to 70%. But I think if you have an email, you almost don't want to you want to have some variability. You don't want to draw too much fatigue, right? Like some emails don't have to be super long. Like an email can be as simple as like, listen to this Fire Peter Yu podcast, and if you want to live to 100, listen to it. Like something like that. And you just drop the podcast in there, and people will thank you and they'll associate you with that person. But that's, open rates, I think. I heard this really good. It's like, it's okay to have this kind of clickbaity title as long as you deliver on the clickbait.
Yeah.
Like so people are like, oh man, I don't want to have clickbait on my title, but it's like it's okay. It's only clickbait if you didn't deliver on the actual title. So if you have stuff where it's like, you know, what Sue learned after recovering from 20 years of back pain, like I would read that if I'm in back pain. You know what I mean? Like, and you just got to deliver on what she learned.
100%. Speaking of like kind of these clickbaity, titles, have you ever like utilized ChatGPT to kind of help curate some of these like subject open lines?
I'll use ChatGPT, but the key with ChatGPT, right? It's like when you want to create these subject open lines, instead of just saying like, "Hey, give me like 10 subject lines," for selling a online business coaching course for a physical therapist. Cool prompt. Give me 10 lines for selling an online business coaching course for physical therapists, but pretend you're Matthew McConaughey. You know what I mean? Like that is the thing that's gonna make it like a little bit more twangy if that's what you want. So like there's a couple of authors and like speakers that I really like, very cheeky professionals. When I ask it to generate prompts, you know, I will ask it to generate prompts within that person's kind of a lens or experience. Like, what do you use for ChatGPT for stuff like that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of a lot of times I like to kind of come up with the ideas myself, and then if I feel like, hey, I need to come up with a spin of it. So exactly what we'll just say we'll use that example of like, hey, here's how my client got rid of like 20 years of chronic back pain. So I'll take that, and you can kind of use data, right, to see, hey, okay, this type of headline generated a ton of really good like interaction, whether it's the number of clicks on the link or the opens, and then from there feed that into ChatGPT. It's like, hey, like I'm a cash pay performance physical therapist, and this is my weekly newsletter that I put out, and this is a subject title that did really well. Can you come up with 10 other different similar ones that can generate like pretty good open rates, that means that's interesting for my type of demographic. So I think, yeah, it's like using your own historical data that has done well to kind of do spin-offs of it. Or I love what you said with using personalities like Matthew McConaughey, right? give
Yeah.
it give it some flair, give it make it interesting.
Yeah, there's still an art to utilizing AI, right? That I
Yeah.
think creative people will become more creative, less creative people will still be vanilla. Like you've got, and I think everything is just a skill. One thing that I will say from a taste perspective, right? It's like there's a good book by Rick Rubin. He's a creative like music producer, and he's worked with like the best in the business. And it's called the Creative Act, a way of being. And in the beginning of the book, he kind of talks about like how you should just absorb the classics. You should treat yourself to high quality things so you understand like the difference between things, right? Like listen to
Mhm.
every song that the Beatles have pumped out. Stay at the Four Seasons, eat like a really amazing French omelet, like do all of these things so that you understand the difference between like high quality and something that's like not that high quality. And I think from a creative perspective, it's like people need more inputs. Like people should watch really, really good comedy. Like if you've watched every single Dave Chappelle and like Chris Rock stand up, like you will start to get better at writing emails and speaking, right? If you like watch every Matthew McConaughey movie and you watch how he communicates, like the guy is so cool, laid back, like you're gonna feel that. You can like start to summon some of that energy when you need it. But I think where people struggle with the most is like they just mindlessly absorb things and they don't
Yeah.
take a liking to the classic stuff or stuff that's like globally liked. Like if something is globally liked, you almost want to like study something a little bit. Like why the hell does everyone love the Beatles so much? Like let's listen
Mhm.
to that.
Yeah, I love that. It's like take the, the things that inspire you, and then like do like a mood board or something like that, and then basically figure out, hey, what are the common themes that make all these classics so great? And then how can I mimic my style off of, the things that inspire you? Um, and I think the main thing is just like people got to understand, hey, like your first weekly newsletter or your first email that you send out, it's not going to be great. Like we'll just straight up just tell you, like, it's going to suck. It's probably going to suck a lot. All right. But if you know that ahead of time, like it makes it okay, right? And because you understand, hey, it's like my expectations for it aren't that going to be high. So hopefully that removes your guys' like barrier of like just sending that first email out.
Do you almost feel like, 'cause I think you're so accustomed and you've gotten acclimated to the thought of failing that it doesn't phase you quite as much. Yeah, like, do you feel the same way? It's like when you start something new, you're like, oh man, I can't fucking wait to look back at this. Like, do you get that?
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think this is something that probably it wasn't really until the last like year or two that I've really like understood the concept of failing and that it's completely 100% okay. And then you almost have to like welcome it because you know the number of repetitions that you take from I don't even know if we've probably talked about this before, but I don't necessarily like the word failure. We talk about, hey, like his area of opportunity is how you view it. But more times of repetitions that you get in of getting the chances to like tweak it and optimize it a little bit more makes you that much better. But the thing is, you won't know what to change until you actually do the damn thing.
Yeah. No, I same thing. It's like I don't I think it took until last year for me to actually see the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
I almost took it way too personal. Right? It
Yep.
was like, oh, it's my character. It's like, no, it's just like it's a natural kind of way of life. When you're getting into the state of writing, like who inspires you? Is there like do you listen to music? Like what is your workflow when you kind of get into writing?
I've had I've gone through multiple different reiterations of this. So I used to, and this is the same thing with it's almost parallel with how I used to train as well too. I used to have to like whether it was studying or like getting to really really deep thought or I was like training for like races or even just like a workout. I would have to curate this playlist of a certain type of music that will like get me in a zone. So I remember back in college it was like some deep house, so Kygo, and then I would listen to this like Yuruma, like the piano stuff, right? You know what I'm talking about? It's like, okay, this is like soothing. And then for like workouts, I would have to have, like Tupac or like Lil Wayne, Drake, right? It has to be like the perfect type of music to like get me in the mood. But like over the years, like as I've like gotten or done more and more of these like repetitions, I guess, I slowly feel like my dependency on some of these like exterior inputs in order to get me into a certain state like doesn't necessarily need to like exist. So for me, like I know a lot of people, they when they get into like a working state they need to be in like a coffee shop. For me, like my current like flow state is really just, hey, like I sit down at like my computer and I just like I turn my phone on do not disturb, and then I just like get into work. And I understand for me, like it'll probably take me about like 10 to 15 minutes to really like bake into like my deep state. And so I'll like allot that into my like working block. And then from there I can do probably about like an hour and a half, 2 hours of like deep flow work before I need to, get up and take a break.
I think there's in the beginning we're all amateurs, right? And when you're an
Yeah.
amateur, like everything needs to be done for you. Everything's got to be optimal and perfect for you to execute. And then we're like Stephen Pressfield, the book Turn Pro, he's like, if you're a pro, pros just are able to summon it within like any given moment, right? Like if you're fucking Beyonce about to step on stage, you just boom, you're fucking oozing charisma just
Yeah.
thinking about it. And it's like, I think as you alluded to, it's like when you keep doing this stuff, it just naturally comes to you. There was a great quote by somebody. It's like, I only write when motivation strikes, and thankfully it strikes every day at 7 a.m. And I was like, that's a
I
sad
love
truth.
that.
Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But
And
I was in the same way. Like when I wrote my best man speech for my brother, fucking listen to John
yeah,
Legend for like 2 hours, like just like getting me emotional and shit.
I love that.
But man, writing, I would say, is up there with like public speaking, marketing, and sales. And I think when we think of it from like a principles perspective, right? It's like, what are we trying to do with our writing? It's like I want someone to read this writing and feel like they're kind of related or connect. They can connect to this. And if we do that well, that builds trust, and we know what happens when trust is built.
Yeah, 100%. And you guys have to understand that email, it's a long term play. Right? It's not something that it's gonna like, hey, immediately generate you clients and revenue overnight. But it's something that like as you consistently compound on it, like people will continue to know, like, and trust you more and more, right? Continue to provide value out there. And then this stuff just snowballs, especially, when you're 2, 3, 4, 5 years in. And ultimately, you think about, hey, like, what's a 10-year time frame going to look like? And it's just like, you're probably this like pretty freaking unstoppable force because you just provided 10 years of value out there. It's like, there's just so much goodwill out there that like, you can't lose.
No, exactly. And uh, with emails, it's like, remember, you could take something and make it something else, right? Like, we don't have to, if you read a testimonial, if you show a testimonial, right, you can talk about the patient story. If you're demonstrating an exercise that you did on Instagram, you can talk about, a seminar, who you learned it from. Oh yeah, this drill. This is actually a drill that I learned from Derek Hampton when I learned from him in this sprint course. And this is the amazing part about this drill, and you can break down some of the nuances. Then people are like, "Damn, this guy learned from one of the best sprint coaches alive." Right? It's like every kind of piece of content that you put in a newsletter, you can create a nice like background to it to position yourself as an expert, to deliver a little bit more value, to set the stage a little bit more appropriately as like why this is important. But you don't need like, it doesn't need to be like a freaking systematic review, and you don't have to talk about like confidence intervals, right? And like p values. It's like, bro, your client does not care about it. They want to know why the hell skipping is
Yeah.
important. What are like what is this drill going to do for them? It's going to improve your running. Perfect. Like, just break that down in simple layman's terms.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that I heard is just like when you're doing email, just pretend you're talking to your friend. Right? The person in front of you is just a conversation that you're having with like your buddy over like a beer, and it's super conversational, it's friendly, and you're just out there having fun. If you can kind of start to see like weekly newsletters or emails or whatever it is that you feel like you are dreading right now as as like a turn into something fun, it'll be that much better. And then I think there's also too, it's like the more you do something at the very beginning, you suck at it, so it doesn't like it's not fun at all. But then the more you do, you slowly start to see kind of like the ROI from it. Oh damn, like I had a client actually reply to my call to action, and it's like, oh wow, this is actually, it's like reinforcing. And so the more you do it, eventually at some point you're going to get some positive input and positive feedback loop, and so that'll kind of encourage you to do a little bit more. So at the beginning it may not be fun, but it doesn't have to be fun, right? But eventually it will be fun, hopefully.
100%, man. And there's, I think there is some sort of implicit bias towards people that are very clear with their writing, meaning like if you can write really, really well, it's almost like when someone can speak really, really well in front of a camera, you naturally gravitate towards that person. It's like, wow, this person feels really confident. If someone can write really well, you automatically respect that person more because there's a lot of effort that goes behind like really, really clear writing. And as you get good at it, that's something that transcends just newsletters, right? You start to write better copy for like the content that you're about to create. You start to understand like better taglines. So it's like if you master your subject lines, you're probably pretty good at creating like a quick tagline in the beginning of a video. All these skills like interweave within one another. And I think writing has got to be a top 5 skill that I think everyone's got to develop.
Yeah, 100%. Well, guys, hopefully you enjoy this podcast episode. Believe it or not, we actually have a weekly newsletter template that we have for a lot of our people that we work with inside Go Getters Coaching. But we actually have it as we're all about providing free value resources for you guys. So if you guys want a copy of our weekly newsletter that you want access to, so you can use it for yourself, what's a word that they should say, Andy?
DM us newsletter. Let's keep it simple.
Newsletter. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Love that.
Awesome, guys. Appreciate you for tuning in. As always, like and subscribe. Give us a little 5-star review on Spotify. If you're listening to us, share this on Instagram. Tell us what you like. Hit us with a DM. We're open to any feedback. If you're like, yo, this podcast sucks, we know because it's the first, we haven't done 100 episodes yet. It's going to get better, right? We practice what we preach. We know we suck, but we're still going to keep showing up. So appreciate you guys. Have a blessed week, and let's get after it.
Peace.
Peace.